Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The United States and India have agreed on a trade deal after a phone call between President Trump and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The US will lower tariffs on Indian imports to 18%, while India agrees to reduce tariffs and non-tariff barriers on US goods to zero and stop buying Russian oil. President Donald Trump has warned that bad things could follow if Iran fails to reach a deal with the US, as pressure mounts after Tehran's January protest crackdown. Former US President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton have agreed to testify in a congressional investigation into Jeffrey Epstein days before a planned vote on holding them in contempt. The couple deny wrongdoing and say they have already shared all they know. A US federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from ending temporary protected status for more than 350,000 Haitians holding potential deportations amid Haiti's escalating gang violence. Meanwhile, US District Judge Anna Reyes claims that DHS Secretary Kristi Noem acted with hostility towards non-white immigrants. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has announced that all DHS field officers in Minneapolis will be issued body-worn cameras, a move backed by President Donald Trump as a step towards transparency, as the Justice Department also now conducts a civil rights investigation into Pretty's death. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said engagement with China makes us stronger following his visit, but stressed that the UK is clear-eyed about security threats from Beijing and that protecting national security is non-negotiable. The European Union, headed by Anna Pears, head of the Middle East and North Africa Bilateral Instruments Unit for Syria and the Middle East, held talks with Syrian Director of the International Cooperation Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Qutaiba Qadish, as they explored ways to expand cooperation. OpenAI has explored alternatives to NVIDIA's AI chips, citing speed limits in inference tasks like coding. While NVIDIA remains dominant in training chips, the move could test its AI leadership as talks between the two companies continue. Now we start this hour with Iran and US. Iran has reportedly shown a willingness to suspend its nuclear program in an effort to reach an agreement with the US and ease rising tensions. Media reports claim that Tehran is exploring ways to avoid conflict, possibly by halting its nuclear activities. Sources close to the discussions suggest that Iran is open to the idea of forming a regional consortium for nuclear power production, which would involve multiple countries. This proposal reportedly comes amid ongoing back-channel communications between Iran and US officials. Meanwhile, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff are expected to meet in Istanbul on February 6th, with US President Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner also in attendance. Senior officials from Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt will join the talks as well. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Collins Chong-Yu Keith. He's a Foreign Affairs, Security, and Strategy Analyst, joins us live from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you very much, Mr. Collins, for joining us. Thank you. Now Iran seems to be, it seems to have maybe decided to ease out on how hard stance they were about their nuclear ambitions. Do you think this is their strategy, or do you think they are cornered right now? That's why they have come up with this.
Well, it's a combination of both, but as I've stated, they have been at the losing end in terms of, any possibilities of a greater tit for tat move or hardening the stance against President Trump's approach. We have seen how this is a testimony of how President Trump has used the peace through strength approach, effective deterrent measures, And of course, also we've seen, this a mixture of the tools being used by Washington and President Trump have managed to compel Tehran to come to the negotiating table, and hence we have seen this being reflected in the willingness of Tehran to also show signs of goodwill. And of course, also we have seen also these tensions within Iran itself. Some reformists have been have been all for this deton and these efforts to de-escalate risks, while hardliners within Iran also have historically not been that keen. And we have seen how this increased U.S. posture in terms of the forceful display of deterrence efforts, and of course also the credibility of the cost being imposed should Iran is unwilling to toe the line. And we have seen a combination of factors in domestic politics in Iran, as well as the efficacy of the posture and the moves by President Trump in pushing for Iran to come to this offer. And of course, if it does not, then they are cognizant of the facts of the red lines being imposed, and the willingness, especially the willingness of President Trump to impose those red lines and to impose costs on the current regime, and this will spell even further disasters for the future legitimacy and survival of the regime itself. So hence we have seen this wise choice being made, but of course also we have to be wary of the couple of days and weeks to come in terms of the success of this broader opening up by both sides. And we have seen also this precedent in place by past agreements where there's yet to have this sustained momentum and lack of trust and on both sides to see that through. And of course also there needs to be a sustained measure by both sides to ensure that this will be lasting and not being temporary in nature.
Right. And so what do you think US's main motive is? If it is regime change, then a few negotiations and maybe decide or agreeing over their nuclear or limiting their nuclear ambitions, that doesn't achieve what US eventually or ultimately wants, right? So what do you think is their motive?
Well, we have seen how it has played out for the past couple of weeks now. Different thoughts and arguments have been put forth as to what really is the motive of President Trump in pushing Tehran, and of course some actions have been held back a couple of weeks ago to give more rooms and platforms for the current regime to show signs of goodwill and to mitigate and to make some changes on the ground. And a lot depends also on the willingness of the current regime to negotiate, especially in regards to the sensitive topics about nuclear containment and nuclear proliferation. And if they have this intent and the openness to show that they are willing to talk and to do some necessary actions that will be reflected on the ground on a long-term basis with regards to this issue that has been at the main forefront, which is the nuclear issue. And if that is being managed well, then I don't see the need or any further pretext by the Trump administration to escalate things further. So as I've stated, it all depends on the sincerity and the outlook on both sides, but especially from Tehran, as to how we'll manage these ties with Washington moving forward, knowing that any wrong moves or any wrong messages being sent will then spell further risk to its own survival, its own regime. So I don't see that happening for now, at least for now, in terms of regime change, and the core focus will still remain on the issue of nuclear, as well as the reform measures and the treatment of the people in Iran. So those will be the two main factors that will be in play, and it depends also on what actions that regime will take to show positive momentum, positive progress, and to ward off any risk of that action being taken by Washington. But for now, I don't see that happening.
And lastly, Mr. Collins, so how do you see the alignment of all the envoys or delegation who will be present in the upcoming talks, such as Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, then U.S. Special Envoy, also Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, then senior officials from Middle Eastern countries like Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt.
Well, of course, we've seen how the regional fears and wariness and tensions have been escalating, and of course also the Gulf states and other regional actors have been fearful of further escalations and the very consequential spillover impact, not only to the region but to the entire world. Fearing an all-out war between Iran and the US will definitely destabilize the whole power equation, will destabilize energy markets, will destabilize the security prospects in the region. So and this will have long-term chain effects affecting not only these nations but the whole equation also. So of course they can their actions and their push and their diplomatic efforts have been bearing fruits for now, acting as facilitators, and of course also the presence of Kushner has been also instrumental in in ironing out these key differences and to tell things frankly that red lines have been there, and that the approaches and models being used by the current Trump administration are definitely not similar to those that have been used before, at least on conventional terms under the Obama and Biden administrations. So for now, there's no playing games with President Trump, as Venezuela's incident has been proven, and that and this, I think this key message is now being acknowledged by the current Iranian regime, that the timeline now is definitely different from those eras of the Biden and the Obama administrations, and that but we have seen how regional diplomacy and shuttle diplomacy and back and forth have been also bearing fruit. Of course, it's our hope that de-escalation will continue to remain, but it all depends also the ball is in the court of the Iranian regime now to showcase goodwill and the willingness to extend this convergence of incentives for both sides to de-escalate and to show credible commitment and mechanism to preserve these agreed points moving forward.
With that, I'd like to thank Mr. Colin Chong-Yu-Keith for joining us. Thank you. Now we have a breaking news. We have also more details on the upcoming talks, which are scheduled for 6th. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, Pakistan, Egypt, and the UAE. All these countries have been invited to the Istanbul's upcoming meeting in Turkey. The format of the talks to be held on February 6th remains unclear, but the primary goal, according to a regional official, is to avoid further conflict and de-escalate the tensions between Iran and US. Now we move on to US. US case files linked to Jeffrey Epstein contain references to Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. According to reports, an anonymous 2024 email in the files makes allegations involving trafficking, though no evidence is provided and the identities are concealed. The documents also include Epstein's messages discussing Ukraine's 2019 presidential elections and remarks about opportunities during political upheaval. Zelensky's name appears multiple times, often through shared news articles, with some files still unavailable. Ukraine has not responded to this yet. Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General Siddha Gargi. He's a senior strategic and international affairs expert, joins us live from Jaipur. Thank you very much, Major General, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, so many scandals have come out of this Ukraine's current administrations, and now towards Zelensky. So how politically damaging is this Epstein-linked controversy now?
It's a terrible thing taking place, Soma, and very, very disturbing development, and the Ukraine itself is in thick of ongoing conflict, and the only man who has led the nation from the front to a disaster is also found in the list of Epstein file, is very, very upsetting and terrible for the nation, for the individual Zelensky itself. And if the truth is revealed and if he is found very deeply involved in sensitive issues, then perhaps it will have a telling impact on the ongoing efforts of the peace. Because who else, after if Zelensky is roped in and gets trapped in Epstein file, who else is going to? That is one angle. Second angle, a president of a country figuring in such objectionable kind of a file. Yes, we are aware that Donald Trump's name is also appearing, Elon Musk's name is also there, and host of other very important high-profile personalities of the world are there. But Zelensky's is actually going to name, figuring in Epstein file is going to give a different kind of a turn to the entire conflict which is taking place here. And more than that, we need to be mindful of the fact for what purpose, what was he doing? So it is basically the human trafficking that is even more serious. You know, sending women and girl children from Ukraine to unknown places, that's more very, very serious. That is the global body which has to look into it. It is a global phenomenon, not only restricted to America alone. Back to you, Asuma.
Yes. So if these disclosed emails are accurate, how serious are the implications, both legally in terms and also in terms of national trust on Zelensky? And also, since Zelensky hasn't reacted to this yet, do you think they will again blame it on Russia?
Yeah, but obviously, because now at the moment it is too premature to come to any conclusion. One really can't say what is the truth. The black and white kind of a comparative matrix is emerging, whether it is true. The veracity of this input has to be confirmed. It's only then that one can point a finger and take an investigative turn. And it is only after that, because it is an individual, and that too, the individual happens to be the leader of a country which is in the thick of the ongoing conflict. So these are very important dimensions which will have a very serious impact on the ongoing peace process, as also he as an individual will have an impact on him, because he will be trapped in a subject which is international in nature. The human trafficking is a very, very serious matter which has to be investigated by agencies responsible for it, call it human rights organization or Amnesty International or whoever is looking after. This have a very serious turn of event, so much so that the people of Ukraine had reposed faith on this man, thinking that perhaps he will lead them to some kind of a justifiable and bona fide end state. On the contrary, in addition to the damage and the losses of innocent lives of Ukraine, he has led the nation to a kind of a blasphemous kind of achievement, which is not going to be accepted by the people so easily. Therefore, he has to go extra mile to, defend himself, justify that this thing is either wrong, and if it's right, then he has to actually give the reasoning as to why did he do what he is being alleged to have done. These are very serious things. Therefore, will have an impact on his image, impact on the nation, impact on the peace process. Back to you, Asuma.
With that, I would like to thank retired Major General Sudakarji for joining and sharing that insight. Now we move on to our next news. The son of Norway's Crown Prince, Marius Borg Hoby, will stand on trial on the charges of rape, domestic violence, assault, and drug possession, among other crimes, one of several cases that have shaken the Norwegian monarchy. Marius Borg Hoby, the son of the Crown Princess Mette-Marit and the stepson to Crown Prince Haakon, could face multiple years in prison if found guilty of the most serious of the 38 charges brought against him. According to reports, Hoby did not admit criminal guilt for the charges of rape or domestic violence, but did admit guilt for some of the less serious matters. Now we move on to Asia. A special court in Bangladesh has sentenced former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to 10 years in prison on corruption charges, while her niece, UK lawmaker Tulip Siddiq received a 4-year sentence. The verdicts relate to a government housing project near Dhaka, where prosecutors say Hasina misused her power to illegally secure land for family members. The court has also handed 7-year sentences to other relatives, including another niece and nephew. The rulings comes as Bangladesh's interim government, led by Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus, prepares for national elections later this month. With Sheikh Hasina's Awami League barred from participation, Hasina and Siddiq have both denied the allegations, calling the verdicts politically motivated, while Sheikh Hasina has lived in exile in India since her ouster in 2024 and is unlikely to return to serve her sentence. Now for this, we welcome Ambassador Veena Sikari. She's a former High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ms. Ambassador Sikari, for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. Now, how significant is this sentencing in reshaping Bangladesh's political landscape, especially towards Awami League and towards political elites there?
Well, I think that much of this trial and the earlier one also, you know that Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina
Yes.
has also received a death sentence,
Yes.
you know, which is claimed to be for the people who died and so on. But these courts are really not something that can be accepted as of the best, because what happened when the new government took over, when the interim regime took over, headed by Muhammad Yunus, it really was part of a regime change operation. There was no spontaneity in the students' protests. They were not students at all. They were actually members of the Jamaat-e-Islami and of the youth wing of the Jamaat-e-Islami, called the Islami Chhatra Shibir. So it is a highly political kind of political vendetta exerted against Sheikh Hasina by those who, like the Jamaat-e-Islami, who are really radical fundamentalist organizations. And the group that took over, Muhammad Yunus, backed by the Jamaat-e-Islami, backed in turn by Pakistan and of course supported by the Western powers, they equally, through mob action, through mobocracy, changed the entire judiciary. So all the old judges who were there in the previous government, and you know, the judiciary is supposed to be independent, it's not supposed to be political or anything like that, it's not supposed to be politicized also, but the old judges were surrounded by mobs and forced to resign. And these new judges who have come in, they have been you know, doing these kind of trials. For example, in the previous trial, it was really a kangaroo court, because it was tried by a court which had actually been set up long ago in 1973 by Sheikh Hasina's father, to try those who had committed war crimes in the Liberation War of 1971, and to alter the mandate of a court. And then the person who had been the defense prosecutor earlier was now made the chief judge, etc. It has really been quite a mockery of the judicial system. And I think a lot of this effort is to deliberately show Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in the wrong light, and to highlight the so-called illegal acts that she has done. For example, in this very case that you're talking about, the 10-year judgment in the case of something which is claimed to be an irregular allotment of land, her niece, Tulip Siddiqui, who actually has been a member of parliament in the British Labour Party, she has also been convicted, and the British government, the British Labour Party, has rejected that verdict and said we don't accept it, because they don't feel that the trial has been done in any kind of a fair way. So I think that this is all part of the same thing, and this is building up an atmosphere towards the elections, which are just going to be held on the 12th of February, you know, where the Awami League is not being allowed to participate. You know, the elections, so-called elections, are being described as free and fair, but they have deliberately banned the single largest party of Bangladesh, which is the Awami League, from participating in the election for no reason at all. They just decided that they will ban the activities of the Awami League, and even that is not you know, does not mean that the Awami League should be banned from participating in elections, but this regime has decided that it should be so. So yes, this is being seen as completely partisan, completely favoring the Jamaat-e-Islami and the other party, the BNP. whose leader Tariq Rahman has just returned to Dhaka after 17 years in London in exile, where he was, allowed to stay by the British government. So I think the whole atmosphere in Bangladesh today is something that seems to be created by two people who are very important in Bangladesh today, which is the ambassador of the USA and the High Commissioner of the UK. And they are, going around meeting people and talking about the elections and the elections results, and which is very, very surprising to see something like this happening. Yes. And I think that, Western countries like the UK, the USA, the European Union, they always favor democracy. They always favor free, fair and inclusive elections, participatory elections. Yes. But now this time, the European Union, for example, has reversed its own definitions. And the leader of a very senior European Union country is saying, no, inclusivity does not mean all political parties. It means the people must participate. So, it's really a kind of very unnatural and sham event going on in Bangladesh today, where all definitions, all procedures have been totally reworked, redefined to suit the conditions and to ensure that parties like the Jamaat-e-Islami or the BNP or a combination of the two come to power.
Right. And lastly, so what impact could Sheikh Hasina's exile and refusal to return have on this credibility of court ruling? Also, Bangladesh relations with regional and international partners. Also, do you think they will be able to hold a peaceful election now?
Well, so far not at all, because so far there's been a lot of violence, a lot of clashes even between the two parties, the BNP and the Jamaat, and a lot of irregular practices. There is even the participating party, the BNP, Tariq Rahman has complained to the Election Commission that a lot of people are being brought into Dhaka, and that the vote cards that are issued, they're being issued 12 or 15 on one card, different names but the same number. That kind of, a lot of complaints are there. So there is by no means any indication at all that this will be a free and fair election. It is not inclusive, that we already know. It is not participatory, because we know that the Awami League, the single largest party which has a vote bank of 30 to 40%, is not being allowed to participate. And in fact, their supporters are being intimidated. They are being told that you go and vote for the Jamaat-e-Islami. They are being told that if you don't do that, then your family is in danger, your life is in danger. So there's a whole lot of intimidation, there's a whole lot of illegal activities, unfair practices. But I do not know how the Western democracies, who cherish these very aspects of free, fair and participatory elections with proper, designation of voter ID and making sure that nobody votes twice on the same card. They know all that. They do it all in their own countries. But then in Bangladesh, for some reason, which is very, very strange and difficult to understand and to fathom, they have changed their own definitions. They accepted the fake trial of Sheikh Hasina, which gave her the death sentence. They haven't said anything about this trial of giving her a 10-year sentence. And in all these trials, Sheikh Hasina has not been able to present her defense. They have said nothing. The Western countries have said nothing about the large number of minorities, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Christians, and even the Muslim minorities, the Sufis and the Ahmadiyyas, who've been killed, who've been raped and lynched, and their properties have been grabbed and their businesses have been destroyed. But there's not a word from the Western countries about that. I mean, they think as though it's par for the course, as though this happens every day in their own countries, So there's such a credibility gap that has been created by the Western countries, by their own actions in Bangladesh over the last 18 months, that it really comes to me as a huge surprise. I did never expected that this would happen one day in Bangladesh, that you'd have the Western countries who are said to have supported the regime change operation. These very same countries are now promoting an election which is not free or fair or inclusive. And, they are just at all times looking at these kind of fake trials and kangaroo courts and judgments which are not warranted at all, and taking some kind of solace in that, as though it justifies their decision to ban the Awami League's participation. I think the Awami League as a party should participate. It's not a question of Sheikh Hasina. She may not be able to go back, her family may not be able to go back, but the Awami League as a party to disenfranchise 40% of the population of Bangladesh, I mean, that's unheard of in a democracy. But it's happening in Bangladesh, and that's very, very surprising indeed.
Ambassador.
The Western countries must bear the full burden of the guilt for allowing this to happen.
With that, I'd like to thank Ambassador Veena Sekhri for joining us today and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now moving on to US, after months of tensions between Colombian President Gustavo Petro, he has arrived in Washington for a crucial meeting with US President Donald Trump. The summit comes after a series of disputes, including disagreements over immigration and drug trafficking. Petro was previously unable to travel to the U.S. after his visa was revoked last year in September, but he has been invited back following the phone call with President Trump last month that reports say has set the stage for this important encounter. The visit follows Petro's commitment to addressing the U.S.'s concerns about drug trafficking. His government is now keen to show progress, especially after the U.S. military operation in neighboring country, Venezuela. That has led to the capture of President Nicolas Maduro, while President Trump, who had once revoked Petro's visa due to comments made at the UN General Assembly, is now reportedly eager to engage with the Colombian leader. Now we have a breaking news. The Kremlin says it has received no official communication from India regarding reports that New Delhi may halt purchases of Russian oil. The statement comes after U.S. President Donald Trump commented on India's energy ties with Moscow. Kremlin officials have stressed that Russia's strategic partnership with India remains extremely important and said Moscow intends to continue developing bilateral relations. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.